a book that I really enjoyed reading. The story is very heart touching. The book is called Goodnight, Goodnight Mister Tom by Michelle Magorian. I'll start by reading the blurb. Young Willie Beach is evacuated to the country as Britain stands on the brink of Second World War. A sad, deprived child, he slowly begins to flourish under the care of old Tom Oakley, but his new-found happiness is shattered by a summons from his mother back in London. London is poised on the brink of World War II. Timmy scrawny William Beach, the abused child of a single mother, is evacuated to the British countryside. At first, he is frightened of everything. The country sounds, the country sights, even of Mr. Tom, the gruff, kindly old man who has taken him in. But gradually, Willie forgets the past, the hate and despair of his past. He learns to love a world he never knew existed, a world of friendship and affection in which harsh words and daily beatings have no place. I'll be reading a snippet of chapter 3. Chapter 3, Saturday morning. When Willie awoke, it was still very dark. Straining his eyes, he could just make out the two boxes which were stacked in the far corner of the room, and a picture frame which was propped up against them. He raised his arm and touched the sloping ceiling above his head. The pain that had brought him sharply back to consciousness seared violently through his stomach. He held his breath and pushed his hand down to the bed to touch his nightgown. It was soaking. It was then that he became aware that he was lying in between sheets. That's what they did to people after they had died. They laid them out in a bed. He sat up quickly and hit his head on the eave, crawling out of bed. Doubled over the pain he got his gut, he hobbled over to the window and let out a frightening cry. He was in a graveyard. He was going to be buried alive. The pain grew in intensity. He gave a loud moan and with a sudden retch vomited all over the floor. In the morning, Tom found him huddled under the bed. The sheets were drenched in urine. He stripped them off the mattress and carried Willie down to the living room. It was a hot, sultry day. The windows were wide open, but no breeze entered the cottage. Willie stood in front of the range. Through the side window he could see his grey garments and underwear hanging on a small washing line outside. Tom pulled the voluminous nightshirt over his head and threw it into a copper tub with the sheets. He sluiced Willie's body tenderly with cold water and soap. The wheels stuck out mauve against his prodding ribs and swollen stomach. He could hardly stand. Sorry, mister, he kept repeating fearfully. Sorry, Mr. Tom. Tom just grunted in his usual manner. He pulled Willie's clothes from off the line and handed them to him. Too hot for socks, he muttered. Leave them off. I can't go out without me socks, cried Willie in alarm. Please, Mr. Tom, I can't. Why? Tom snorted. Me legs, he whispered. He didn't want everyone to see the mark of his sin. Tom sighed and threw the socks on the table. They had breakfast by the open window. Tom sat with his shirt sleeves rolled up, the beads of sweat trickling down the side of his ruddy face, while Willie continued to shiver, managing only to drink half a cup of tea and eat a small piece of bread. Blimey blue, muttered Tom to himself as he observed Willie's face. He cleared the breakfast things and left him with the small addressed postcard that he had been provided with to write a message on for his mother. Willie sat dejectedly at the table and watched Tom drag his small mattress past the window. He could hear him scrubbing away at it. He lowered his head. He was so ashamed. Everyone who came near the church would see it and realize how wicked he had been. They'd know what a baby he was. He hadn't meant to wet himself. He didn't even remember doing it. He stared at the small postcard in front of him, clasping a pencil impotently between his fingers. He clenched his free hand into a fist and dug his knuckles into the table so that he wouldn't cry. "How are you getting on?" asked Mr. Tom, leaning through the window. Willie jumped and flushed hotly. "Can't think of what to say. That it." He took the pencil from Willie's hand and turned the postcard towards him. Not much room, eh?" Willie tugged at his hair in embarrassment. "Lost your voice?" "No, Mr. Tom," he answered quietly. "What do you want to say then?" He shrugged his shoulders and looked dumbly at the grain on the wooden table. "Are you happy here?" He looked up quickly and nodded. "Yeah, arrived safely. Is happy and Mr. Tom," said Willie, interrupting him. "You going to tell her I was bad?" "No," he said, and carried on writing. "Here, listen to this. Dear Mrs. Beach, William." "She don't call me that. She call me Willie." He altered the word Willie. He continued. "Has arrived safely. Is happy and good. Yours sincerely, Mr. Thomas Oakley." There, he handed the postcard and pencil back to him. "Now write your name." Willie paled. "I can't. Didn't they have school in London?" "Yeah, but—" and he trailed off. "How about reading?" asked Tom. "You can read, can't you?" "No." "But you was looking at them book last night." "I was looking at the pictures." Tom scratched his head. The village children were reading at least some words by the time they were 6. This boy was 8, so he said. He glanced down at the label on the table to check. William Beach, born September 7th, 1930. 9 on Thursday, he remarked. "Your birthday's in 5 days' time." Willie didn't understand what was so particularly special about that. "You're 9 on Thursday," Tom repeated, but Willie could not think of anything to say. This story is very powerful because Mr. Tom gives Willie the support and encouragement he needs to grow into a creative, individual, confident young boy. And I think we need that. I hope you enjoyed the story, and maybe you'll get to read this book when you get the chance. Thank you for listening to me. Bye bye.